Hello, friends. Judy Herman here. I am so excited to introduce you to one of my soul sisters from the Women's Summit. We were both speakers along with 18 other women around the world on our beloved mentor, Les Brown's platform. And this was back in March the 6th. So the whole month of March has been Women's History Month. And I have had the wonderful privilege of honoring several of the women that have been speakers along with me. So here we have Mary J. Mary J, thank you so much for joining. You are a remarkable woman. You were the one to speak right after mine, and it was a 4-hour long event, so it was pretty long. And you can catch some of that, of course, and we're going to put some links so that you can also hear these speeches as well. Each of us spoke for 10 minutes. But Mary J, thank you so much for being here. It's awesome that you are here. You have a remarkable story. You have a remarkable testimony. And I want to tell folks the thing that I think connected you with me, because I'm a therapist, you're a pastor, you have done a whole lot of your ministry within the four walls of the church. And I have done my ministry basically within the four walls of my counseling office. And so, but there was something in me that has risen up that realizes there's a bigger platform. More people need to have the exposure of the work that we're doing because it's a bigger work than either one of us put together. So I just love that you started this beautiful ministry of women called Women of Treasure. So yes, share about that, Mary J. And we both have our mugs, by the way. Our Women's Summit mugs, thanks to Yashika B, who made this for us. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Judy, for having me. I am honored and so grateful to be here to share with everyone on today and to be a part of your platform. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited about all of what's taken place already during the Power Voice Summit and to share with so many beautiful women from all over the world that came together to share their powerful stories. I am Mary J, the founder and CEO of Women of Treasure. It's an organization that was birthed outside of the walls of the church that God instructed me as I labored along with so many other beautiful women, pastors' wives, ministers, and deacon wives, and those women who were just serving in the church. And a little bit about my background. I grew up in the church. I came from a very loving Christian home. I got pregnant at the age of 16 with my childhood sweetheart that I grew up in church with. His grandmother was my Sunday school teacher. And of course, very prideful family that I came from that thought that this would not bring honor to the family. The parents arranged a marriage that I did not welcome. I just did not want. Can you imagine at 16 years old? I was like, oh my gosh, I remember the day that I was getting married, locking myself in the bathroom, actually crying my eyes out, saying, I don't want to marry him. I don't want to get married. And he was the same age as I was, but it was just not what I had envisioned for my life. And
I want to hold that for a moment because this is a real issue, isn't it? Yeah. Because the church, and I talk about in my message, I grew up in a very, very, very conservative faith denomination, and you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't play cards, and you for certain don't ever engage in premarital dancing, right? I always get a chuckle from that. But I think the thing is, we were given these shame messages around sex, and it wasn't talked about, and thus, and it's not just a certain denomination. It's our whole culture. It's our history. It goes across, different cultures even, and all across the world. So it's not just one thing, but we're kind of like groomed in guilt and shame, aren't we? And I just want to let you know too, if you're a young woman and you have had premarital sex or premarital dancing and you find yourself pregnant, there is no shame in your body carrying a child. There is nothing, this is how God designed and created you to be. Okay. So we've got to separate. Okay. Yes, we made some poor choices and you were 16 and your brain wasn't totally online yet. Yes, we need God's love and forgiveness, right? But you are not to be shamed if you're pregnant. So I just really I needed to share that. And some of us have not lived through that. And anyway, I had to put my 2 cents in there. Mary
I'm glad
J.
that you put your 2 cents there because it is definitely needed because that is just dead on, and that's what I experienced. And so the shame and the guilt and just feeling condemned and cast away and all of the things that Christianity is not, I felt. And so just coming up in that relationship, I went through a lot of trauma. I went through a lot of physical abuse, emotional, verbal. It was just a horrible, horrible time. And so I realized that was not at all what I had intended for my life to be. And so as I began to mature and grow, I found myself in brokenness, broken relationships one after the other. That's why I can't wait to read your book, Judy, Messy Beyond Messy Relationships. I can't wait to just dive into it,
Oh my goodness. I'd love for you to dive into it because I would love your opinion for sure. But I do want to go back to and having grace for your 16-year-old self, Mary J. My 16-year-old self, I was in a crisis as well. But you know what? 16-year-olds, and again, this is a family generational thing. The reason we do what we do is to please the adults that are guiding us, right? And then also we pay a high price to cover whatever we're covering for their shame. You know what I'm saying? So it's like this victim. I don't know, but that's, again, it's a family system thing that needs to be broken through. And I love it that you are able to speak about it because there's so many people that are still living in shame, like 30 years later, 40 years later. And we need to break that shame because it is the silence and the secrecy and judgment that keeps that shame intact. But here you are speaking out, Mary J. And you have this grounding in who you really are, right? That shame and guilt doesn't define you. But anyway, I had to share that as well. You know what? You got a pastor on one part of the screen and a counselor on the other. This is what you get, right?
It's powerful because it's nothing like sharing what you know by experience and also by knowledge of understanding and just experiencing certain things in life that has shaped you and has equipped you to be the person that you are. And that's what Women of Treasure means to me because even with growing up with all of that, I was envied by a lot of the girls. They thought that I had such this wonderful life. My parents put me in this beautiful home with a fireplace, and it was like the little house on the prairie that turned into the nightmare on Elm Street that no one ever knew about, that I did not want to talk to anyone about, and especially in the church. And when I got to, I think in my latter 20s or 30s, I finally began to open up just a little bit and finding myself going to one of my superior leaders who I just admonished as a woman of excellence, a woman of God, that I wanted to share this because even the women that I was leading did not know my background. They didn't know my story. So I began to reinvent myself everywhere I went. It's like I'm this new person in this new space, but you don't know the brokenness that I've come from. And so I found myself sharing that with one of my leaders, and what she said to me, and it was not condescending, and I don't think she really meant it. But of all that, I expressed how I admired her and how I looked up to her and how, that because of all of my past, that I am the woman that I am today because of her leadership and direction. And I remember sharing with her that I had been married and pregnant at the age of 16 from one marriage to the next to the next. And I remember she saying, "Oh my God, I could never imagine doing anything like that." And her husband, who she was married to, she said, "I couldn't imagine being with anybody else other than my husband." Oh my God, Julie, I felt go and crawl underneath a rock. I felt like, oh my God, did I just share all my nakedness? You know?
Oh,
And
yeah, I really want to hold that too, because that is like that will set you back, right? Somebody whom you trusted, somebody that you looked up to, somebody you thought I can share this with. When somebody shares something with me, I think people need to know this because a lot of times they'll hesitate. They won't tell their pastor, they won't tell their counselor certain things. But when I hear where a person's come from, and it may not be my story, but you know what? It makes me appreciate, wow, what a resilient human being you are. That at that time you experience some more. It's like trauma on top of trauma. I mean, you have a trauma, right? You go through it, the guilt, shame, and then you can get set back. How did you deal with that? I mean, was that something that set you back a lot, or what happened?
it set me back as it relates to how I saw people,
Mm,
because I realized that I had put this person on such a high pedestal.
mm,
And
yeah.
God taught me the lesson in doing that. But what God said to me was that I will be saved from silence. He spoke that
Mm,
very plainly in me because no one had ever knew my story. I would never share it with anyone. When I would preach the gospel, I remember preaching, and I would preach from experiences that I have gone through, but not exactly letting the people know that it was about me. And I
mm,
remember this elder of the church came up to me and she said to me, she said, God told me to tell you, the way you preach like that, you're going to set people free. She said,
mm,
you keep doing what God told you to do. Now, I didn't know that I was doing a thing. I didn't even know what I was doing. I just
mm,
knew that every time that I would preach, the anointing would fall upon me and I would share testimonies, not knowing what exactly it was, because in the ministries that I had come up in there, as it relates to leadership, no one was sharing their truth. No one was talking
mm,
about where they've come from or their experiences. Never. That was
mm.
never said. It was all about Jesus and what he did, but no one compared their lives to Jesus Christ. So, in my eyes, it was that everyone that was in leadership was like perfect. You know, they had no flaws, they had no faults. They were just this being. And so when God told me, he gave me the scripture, Proverbs 8 and 21. He said, I will cause those that rise up early to seek me, and they will find treasure in me, and
Mhm.
I will fill their treasure. And that's how Women of Treasure was birthed,
Wow.
because it was an enlightenment that spoke to my spirit. There are some women right among you that are dealing the same way. That who do they go to? Who do they talk to? Who do they confide in?
Mhm.
So he told me to call these women outside of the walls of the church and get to know them one-on-one. And when I started talking to these women one-on-one and having little cell groups, we would go right into our homes and just bring a potluck dish and just have fun and topic discussions and deal with real matters of the heart, is when God began to heal the woman that was right among me. And then when I began to share with them what I had experienced, they were like in awe. They had never knew. And so when he said that I would be saved from silence, is when I started Real Talk Mary J. Talk show,
Wow.
a social outlet for a positive outcome. And I was able in that platform to bring other people on and to deal with relationship topics, to deal with mental health, to deal with low self-esteem and all of the issues that women and men both deal with in silence and
Mhm.
secrecy, and just to help people along the way. So it has
Wow.
been
You,
very rewarding for me. Very
you
rewarding.
have a life-giving ministry. So I have been a therapist for quite some time, and most of my clients over the years have been entrepreneurs, pastors and their families, and business owners, people in leadership. So I do know that what you're sharing is there's some that can't handle this level of transparency or authenticity, because
Right.
then they need to like, oh, look at themselves. And I know that there's a whole lot of issues within the church, and there's a whole lot of issues among those in leadership, pornography, abortion, a bunch of things. So when a woman comes up, it's kind of like Jesus, and the woman that, that came and they were ready to throw stones on her. Jesus never condemned her,
Right.
and then I'd imagine all these were, this is not a man bashing thing, but it's the patriarchal system from our history in our churches everywhere. So when a woman is, it was the woman that's being shamed here, right? But Jesus doesn't condemn you. Go and sin no more is his message. And but you know what? There's freedom. There is freedom in the testimony. There's freedom in this authenticity. And that's why I did name my book, Beyond Messy Relationships, Divine Invitations to Your Authentic Self. This is where God is working, because, we can show people, this perfect Christian life. It just is not that way. God gets with us in the messiness of our lives and meets us there. And then there's transformation and there's resurrection. By the way, this is being recorded on Monday, Thursday. So we got Good Friday tomorrow. We have Easter Sunday. And so Christians around the world are celebrating Easter, the resurrection. And we have resurrection in our lives. I don't believe it's a one-time thing for us as human beings. This is resurrection that the death, the resurrection is a narrative in our lives. What's the new life God is giving us? Anyway, hope I don't sound too much like a pastor these days there, Mary J.
No, you sound like a Christian. You sound like a Christian. And so many people are afraid of that word, because so many years they thought it meant to be perfect, that you had to live this perfect life. But to be Christian is to be like Christ and he is my example. So it has peeled away all of those layers of just man-made rules and laws and regulations, and I've stepped out of the box, and I just want to set people free totally. And it takes transparency to do that. And of course, it's not always accepted by everyone. Some people think, oh girl, you just a little too free for me, but I love this new level of freedom. I tell people now, I've been married 3 times, and no one ever knew that. And I've never said that to anyone, but by the age of 25, I had been married 3 times. And I call those relationships, and I'm sure that you can attest to these titles. I call one Mr. Romeo, one Mr. Rescue, and one Mr. Religion. And I have labeled each one, and I saw the difference in each one, and pretty much was toxic. Now, Mr. Rescue was not, I must say that. He was a wonderful man, the love of my life. He rescued me from a bad state, from a bad situation I was in, but he was much older than I. And we were unequally yoked. And I felt like, even though I was married, had everything that I wanted, had a home, had everything, he would adore me and, buy me whatever I wanted. But I didn't have him, because he traveled all over the country. He worked for an oil company, and he was never home. And so I just felt lonely and not satisfied in that relationship. So when people say you were looking for love in all the wrong places, Judy, that's why I say, no, I was looking for life, because that we were taught, I was taught as a child, is to not have sex before marriage, right? Get married, get a good education, get a good job, and buy a house. So if you had a house and you were married and you had children and a dog, you were the perfect, you were living, you were living it. that it's something more than that,
It really is. It is so much more than that. And now, have you written your book yet? Because that sounds like some good material for a book.
Yes, yes.
But I do talk about and it's no accident. So you learn things, you become more aware, right? With the relationships that you've learned, and you learn that what your part of the dance was. But I really want to encourage people, don't be hard on yourself, because there's this programming and grooming that has gone on subconsciously, not just in our lifetime, but it's gone on subconsciously several generations before. And so when we uncover that, when we learn more about ourselves and we take ownership of our part of the mess, and then all those messes are not wasted, like God uses them all, right? And it is a message. So Mary J, it's been such a blessing. Oh my goodness. I thank you so much for being my guest today. How can people get in touch with you?
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Judy. It was my honor to be here to share with you on today. They can get in touch with me at Mary J on Facebook, and also at womenofTreasure.org, womenofTreasure.org. And we also have a Facebook group. We would love women from all around the world, all walks of life, to join our Facebook group as well.
That's wonderful. You're really breathing life and air. Oh, I know. There was a question I was going to ask you. Yes, I kind of had a set of questions, and I almost forgot about them. But you just now reminded me. So in my book, I do talk about breathing fresh air, awareness, intentionality, and risk. And if there was one thing that you could leave with those that are listening, what is one thing that you would leave with them in order to breathe that fresh air of awareness, intentionality, and risks of growth?
I love that. Fresh air, awareness, intentionality, and risk. Wow. I would say, as I've done, because I can only tell people what I've experienced, and that is just to dig deep within yourself and find a treasure in you. Because, there's someone that once said, there is the day that you were born, that you discover the day that you were born, and the day that you discover what you were exactly born to do. And when you just pause for a moment and dig deep within yourself to search yourself and find what lies beneath all of the stuff, all of the experience, and everything that you could have ever imagined, there you will find your treasure. Your treasure is laid up in all of the broken pieces. So that's where your treasure really is. What another man's trash is someone else's treasure, your treasure is deep within. So instead of being ashamed of the broken pieces, take all those scattered broken pieces and put them together, because there you will find the masterpiece, and that lies within you.
I love that. I love that. And sometimes you have to get dirty and dig right into the dirt and grime to find the treasure. So that's beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us, Mary J. What a gift you are. And so I will put some links in the comments, but thank you so much for joining us. You are so worth it. And yes, want to hear about, if you like this, if this resonates with you, make sure you comment, share, like, and spread the word. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm.